Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Giving up a little bit of your lunchtime here to learn a little bit more about Lightspeed Filter and hopefully how it's going to make your role in school a little bit easier for IT in a way. Generally with these things, it takes a couple of minutes for everyone to filter in and to get started. So you do have that sort of last opportunity to put the kettle on and make a cup of tea over the next couple of minutes. Give it 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and then we will officially get started. Thanks though for connecting, and speak to you in just a few moments. Thank you to those just joining us. This is my second reminder. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update for those who are coming in and didn't hear my initial message. I like to give it just a couple of minutes at the beginning of a webinar for everyone to gather, join, get their thoughts, catch their breath, or in this lunchtime option, get the kettle on and grab a sandwich. So if you've joined since my last message, welcome. And we're probably about 60 seconds out from getting to the content and getting to us beginning and kicking off this webinar. Okay, well, everyone, as promised, I'm going to make a start. Thank you once again for joining me. It's still wonderful to see so many of you here joining us this sunny, certainly sunny for me, Wednesday lunchtime, just after the Easter break. I'm not long back from a break myself and coming straight back into webinar game. And of course, this particular case, I've been stood up as well. Some unfortunate leave meant that Sean Phillips, who was going to be joining me as another Lightspeed compatriot, and one of our senior sales engineers as well, they've left me all in my lonesome. So that's fine for me, because those of you who've met me before will know that I'm quite partial to talking and putting things together. Those of you who have not met me before, my name is Colin McCabe. I'm the international director at Lightspeed. Before that, I was a customer of Lightspeed, working in the IT world, looking after around 18,000 students and in a local authority in Scotland. And before that, as a teacher, looking at digital strategy and looking at digital professional learning for the staff across the local authority. I've centered my career in on the idea of student safety. And one of the things whenever I was looking at a filtering solution was the idea of, why is this so hard? How can I make it easier? And of course, we got together a crack team of marketing experts to come together with the idea of well, how do we try and create some form of a campaign and put on a webinar, and how do we put a title? And of course, we ended up with the world's best pun of making it, or IT, easier for schools. So Apologies for that. Please don't switch off just because of the puns. We'll get to the content in just a second. A few little bits of housekeeping, I guess. Of course, the session is being recorded and will be recorded and sent to you all afterward. I know a lot of people like to catch up on these things afterward, and we'll just sign up to actually just receive the recording. Even then, we're nearly into 3 figures of attendees today, which is excellent. Pretty much exclusively as well from England. A few Welsh names I recognise in the list. A few Welsh customers, a few Scottish customers. Welcome. A lot of our existing customers, and indeed potentially new, or those of you certainly in the IT industry or in the education industry and working directly for local authorities or for schools or multi-academy trusts. This is perhaps your first introduction to Lightspeed. So welcome. Thank you for joining us and giving up some of your time to learn a little today. The general theme, I guess, is going to be highlighting some of the reasons perhaps that a multi-academy trust or a local authority would look at Lightspeed from the theme of ease of use. That is ultimately where I'm wanting to come from. If you're an existing customer listening today, there's possibly tweaks and things that you could change in your setup. If you are with another provider for your filtering today, even if it's not your direct responsibility, or if you're looking at changing, these could be some of the key reasons where you're able to get some time back into your diary. You're able to reduce some of the administrative burdens that perhaps have just became standard operating procedures over the years and could indeed be redesigned, re-engineered to give you a bit more scale, a bit more time back into your day, which of course is something that we would all welcome. I appreciate it's a real mix here, so there will definitely be people who have partnered with Lightspeed on this call for a number of years. As I say, there definitely are some names I don't recognize. And I wanted to make sure to give a little bit of background into Lightspeed itself as we kick off. We are a global company operating in the US and in the UK specifically. Some of our largest markets. And we have our teams in the US based out of Austin, Texas. And we've got the team here in the UK with an office based in Essex. But really, we're a lot more remote. You'll note my accent is certainly not an Essex accent, and we have Lightspeed employees all over the country here in the UK. The size and scale at which we operate makes us the largest player in this field. From my perspective, it means that I have access to the largest pool of resources. From a school's perspective, it means you're potentially working with a partner who's seen it before. Across the 25 million students that we're protecting, or somewhere in the region of 28,000 schools that we work with, we've seen every type of implementation. We've seen every requirement, and ultimately we've evolved a feature set that meets those requirements in as many cases. And then when we get edge cases, we've got the depth of experience to be able to work with you, to be able to ultimately support the goal that is, well, the primary goal of what we're doing in schools, supporting students and learning. That education focus is something I do want to call out. And I guess we are the largest player, but we also lead it from a technology standpoint. Some of the aspects of and how we approach filtering and monitoring are patent protected. Other ways that we do it, we take the most direct and technological route that we possibly can. And it's within our interest to make sure that we are providing the most technical, most comprehensive solution that we can provide. Of course, that goes further, and it is worth calling out that security aspect here, that again, we wouldn't be around if we didn't make sure that we were being very sensitive to the student data that we protect, to the information that we have and the support that we do. Our platforms are based in the US, but we have standard contractual clauses and adequacy agreements that mean somewhere in the region of 3,500 schools in the UK, and then across lots of European countries, back what we are doing from a data security perspective, and partner with Lightspeed to provide their safety and their security tools, which today are going to focus on filter, but across our platform could take a few different lenses. Say we'll be looking at Lightspeed filter in the top left. Tomorrow, we're going to focus a little bit more on the monitoring side of things with our Lightspeed alert tool. Perhaps you had communication about that webinar that's happening tomorrow as well. I know I made a bit of a slip this morning and sent a lot of you a link to sign up to this webinar if you're joining us as a late entrant, and I sent the wrong link. So you would have already got the alert link. Either way, we'll get that sent as we go through. Our classroom management solution is used by millions of students across the world as well to enable screen sharing, to ensure that student screens are monitored and protected. Web links are there, and ultimately the learning and teaching experience is made more efficient when we're using digital devices. We have a Lightspeed mobile device management protecting many iPads, several million iPads and Mac devices across the UK and across Europe. That we are supporting in that aspect, all from one single platform, making it easier to administer all of the tools you're seeing on screen. And lastly, a really exciting tool for me, Lightspeed Digital Insight. So we've got all this data and all this information that we collect from internet filtering logs and all of the data that we get, but we sometimes just put it to a safeguarding use. What if we put that to a few other different uses? Uses around the effectiveness of software licensing, for example. If we're using 1,000 licenses or purchasing 1,000 licenses of a piece of software, but only using 500, how do we know what we're actually using? And getting all of that information from a tool surfaces all those insights for you around how software is being used at every level across a whole multi-academy trust, individual schools, classroom level, and then ultimately down to a really robust student profile as well to understand their full digital story and usage, which is amazing for sharing with faculty. The data itself is amazing for digital strategy work as well. So a really interesting piece of software that we're delighted to have within our portfolio of 5 solutions, ultimately all supporting schools and colleges and in that particular market. That's given you a bit of a background, I hope, in that scenario. And I guess I want to start then our webinar focusing on making IT easier, particularly with Filter, with a why. Well, why? Why do we need to make it easier? I mean, some of this will be very obvious. I appreciate, particularly when we talk about workload. And those of you working in the industry know just the pressures and demands that exist. There's always more that we can do, and we would always love 30 minutes more. So a more efficient or an easier to use tool should, in theory, produce more time in your day. And that's our major premise that we see and we hear time and time again from our customers. But it's within a bigger macro environment that I wanted to just make sure I touched on and give you some background. What we're doing here in the UK and the trends that you as IT directors, or many of you as IT directors in the audience will be seeing, is that we're moving towards a much more device-heavy model. We're using many more devices in education. We're looking more at one-to-one technology. Something that on the left-hand side of this slide, in the US, we've seen nearly 2/3 of schools been doing for many years. We're only just really beginning this. But the idea that whenever you're increasing the amount of digital device usage in the classroom, it really changes the game as to what is happening from the classroom side. And of course, the infrastructure side will need to match accordingly. Some of those changes, well, we're moving from the scenario on the left here again toward the right, timetabled, direct supervised action changes to lessons that are just infused or ubiquitous with technology, where we have connectivity at all times, not just within the school network. Real major shift for how we look at filtering in that scenario as well. And really going from that, we have one device for many to that one device for all, or one device each, I should say. And that's an important move as we see that transition, and it introduces economies of scale. It introduces difficulties with network architecture. Certainly, it does when you're looking at a filtering scenario, and all of it really predicates a larger safeguarding requirement. It's often been seen and sort of thought of, and again, I'm being a little bit controversial, I guess, when I talk about filtering being a little bit of a commodity. It's a difficulty that we see whenever something becomes guidance and is there for a while. And I know, having spoken with even some of you, but similar colleagues in the sector from an IT perspective, that you say, Colin, ultimately, I speak to multi-academy trust leaders or trustees or head teachers, and they don't get it. They ask, are we compliant? Are we compliant? And you go, well, yeah, you are. There are lots of compliant solutions on the market. Of course there are some really excellent ones that meet the requirement. But, if it's got 4 wheels, an engine, and a steering wheel, you might be able to call it a car, but not all cars are made the same. And apologies for that terrible analogy as well. But we do find, particularly where that interface of the IT person, usually the IT director, or it may be you for your individual school, trying to communicate to non-technical members of staff, non-technical colleagues, it can be quite difficult to articulate why you might need to be looking at a filtering solution over the one that is just the base level that's provided by your firewall, or the base level one that's provided by with it sort of bundled with your internet service as well. This will be some of the reasons on the next few slides that will help perhaps you articulate that. Or of course, myself or any of my Lightspeed colleagues are always happy to help articulate exactly why we need this. And I do see that it does link back to the safeguarding requirement being highly increased. You need a specialized tool whenever you're starting to see more of those trends and you're starting to see more of the changes that I articulated here when we move to one-to-one. You're needing some of the granularity and you're really needing an education-specific tool. That's why we're here. It's probably why quite a few of you have signed up to come and listen to this webinar and to tune in, is because you recognize there is a need. The other one, other major trend that sort of comes out of there is just the general landscape of cybersecurity. And please don't mistake me for thinking that filtering is everything that you need to give consideration to when it comes to cybersecurity, but it's certainly a piece of that puzzle. We know that nearly 80% of UK schools received some form of cyber incident and had some form of an issue, and we know that cyber criminals, from a ransomware perspective, are targeting the education sector, sort of viewing it as an easy target, to be honest, more than anyone else. Filtering, as I say, a part to play. It's not everything, but a robust filtering system is going to give you that front line of protection. Where someone clicks on a link to something that may be phishing, it may be malware, it may be ransomware, or some other piece of software, or some other malicious link. Does the supplier of filtering that you have, do they know about it? Have they seen it before? Do they have a way to block all unknowns? Are they making sure that those options are ultimately putting up some extra guardrails on your system, even before something maybe have arrived on a computer and gets looked at by antivirus, or transact across your network and is intercepted by other tools that you have from a cyber perspective? Filtering can certainly provide that front line of support. I'm delighted to be able to include this slide as well as I kind of steer you towards some other guidance and information. We're delighted to be one of the first providers here in the UK that has been fully accredited alongside it. Just another couple. So there's only 3 that are currently have met that criteria, and a few more that will follow very soon, I'm sure. But it's an important accreditation for you to look out for, and to maybe do a little bit of research to know just if your existing provider has indeed met this full accreditation. For many years, the team at the Safer Internet Centre and under the watch of Southwest Grid for Learning have sort of looked to vet and support some form of requirements list for what internet filtering looks like. And Lightspeed as a vendor and others in the similar space have provided a written response that basically self-certified ourselves. But however, now we're moving to a much more robust system. To be able to get this accreditation, we had to meet with the Safer Internet Centre team. We had to meet with some of their experts at a couple of higher education institutions that were partnering with them to be able to provide a robust test of our technology. No longer are we just self-certifying, but we've actually had to undergo a rigorous process to ultimately carry the badge that you see in front of us. And we're very proud of that. We're very proud to be able to say that we are accredited by the Safer Internet Centre as supporting the aims and the goals and supporting all of the requirements that they have identified and set out. which really are referenced in a couple of statutory documents. Again, important to recognize and call some of these ones out, particularly the one on the left here, where we're talking about the standards for filtering and monitoring within schools and colleges. These give the most detailed set of what you should be looking for in a filtering solution. We should be able to get a link to that for you, or a quick Google will be able to make sure that you're there. They're referenced in Keeping Children Safe in Education. And I guess the other major change that KICSI this year for 2023 made that's relevant to this space was that you, certainly as the IT person, shouldn't be the only person looking at filtering and monitoring and this aspect of safeguarding. That we've all got a designated safeguarding lead in our school, and that function exists. Too often, historically, we've had the safeguarding function over here and the IT filtering and monitoring over here, but that responsibility now is firmly embedded within the DSL, and really you should be ensuring that you're collaborating very closely with that department, with that individual colleague, depending on your individual setup, to make sure that filtering and monitoring meets all other aspects of safeguarding within a trust and within a local authority or within a school. Newer ones as well for a bit of research homework you might want to look at. Some really interesting guidance that's came out, particularly around the device, desktop, and tablet standards, and just what that should potentially look like from a device thing. Came out just a couple of months ago, and has been missed by many that I'm certainly talking to. So worth having a little look at that, and the leadership and governance standard around digital technology as well. A really key piece of guidance that's really making sure that there is a strategic lead in place for digital, and some nice little hat tips to our digital insight tool as well around collecting software lists and understanding software usage in school as well. So that's some of the guidance that we've got there. But focusing back on filtering, I have to say and call out the sort of specific tools around effective filtering as being something that I often labor. We've seen the idea that filtering can be a commodity. You've heard my awful pun around a car with 4 wheels and a steering wheel. Meeting that compliance from the UK Safer Internet Centre really broke down that word effective for us, and really helped to give definition as to what are the individual criteria that make up an effective filtering system. And they go quite beyond. And of course, an effective filtering system for schools specifically as well. And there are definitely aspects here and things I want to touch on that are really specific to the schools market, and solutions that are designed elsewhere are probably not going to be getting to those particular spaces. So that's some of the signposting I wanted to give you around the context that we're there. Second half of what I'm going to discuss here now is really about the specifics, a little bit more of what Lightspeed's doing. So we've kind of taken off the more broad market trends hat, and we're going to focus more on a little bit of some of the functionality, in particular within Lightspeed Filter. This, perhaps more so than the section before, I want to try and generate a little bit of discussion. I want to make sure that I can add some value here. We say our webinars are interactive, not just between Lightspeed employees, if I wasn't here all on my lonesome, but also it's an opportunity to ask direct questions as well. So you do have the chat functionality within this webinar platform. You want to drop some comments and questions in there. I can see a few that have already came in, but if there's a question or, excuse me, a little bit of detail you'd like me to go into a little bit more, or if there's something I've left out that you want me to touch on, please feel free to make the most of this time you're investing. Ask the question, get that little specific bit of answer that you need, so you can ask those questions over on the right-hand side of your screen. So with that, we're going to talk about these 4 areas after a quick sip of water. Okay, so four main areas for us to focus on, really, that we really see as setting things apart and making the infrastructure easier, just generally your interactions with other colleagues easier, making even your interactions there, you can see number 4, with parents and that wider school community easier as well. So The responsive cloud platform. This is something that Lightspeed's been doing for a number of years now. We've had a filtering product in the Lightspeed Rocket for longer than a decade as a physical appliance. That's no longer something that we sell and support. And it was a couple of years before the pandemic where Lightspeed moved fully cloud, and we no longer sort of were actively selling that hardware appliance. Because we've seen those trends earlier, particularly across our US client base, we've seen this is what's happening. We're seeing that move to cloud. We're seeing and hearing from our schools that we need access from anywhere, not just when we're in the network. We don't want to have to ask our staff to take a VPN to VPN back into the network to be able to review the logs. We want things to work as fast as they possibly can with the scalability and the highly available nature of the cloud. And we made that move and produced the Lightspeed Smart Agent, which ultimately means filtering happens on the device rather than on a network device. It makes the decision, and then it just pushes the reporting to our platform. So we have on-device filtering, and then we have the cloud platform. It's built in AWS with all of the security standards that we would see within a stack there. It has a huge amount of resource put behind it to make sure that whenever you click and you modify the time frame that you're working with, or you change the group to which a report is being viewed by, or you click into any report, that it is loading just like any web page would. And I say that, you know, as someone who used to use appliances, physical appliances, which, I mean, they've got a limit on the processing power that you build into that physical server. I have spent numerous times in my past waiting for a report to load or waiting for something to happen. And that responsiveness is not something that you necessarily think you need until you have it in that regard. And then you look from a safeguarding perspective, the ability to just hop into the system, secured via single sign-on, of course, and with two-factor authentication and other ways to make sure it's secure and protected. But we've got that protection coming through. You then can access it from anywhere. You can spin it up and see reporting happen from just 2 or 3 minutes ago, perhaps even less than that in some cases, whenever the agent sends that reporting up. And of course, it doesn't just have to be you that's also accessing that cloud platform with admin privileges and permissions that allow you to delegate that to other members of staff. Getting the DSLs and the safeguarding staffs into a platform that is available, a platform that's available to them and available in quite a user-friendly manner as well, means that a lot of those reporting requests that you receive via your IT support teams can be just done themselves. We have the ability to schedule reports that are being sent. That's a functionality that's something that we've long since had on our rockets and that we're delighted to be bringing into our cloud platform as well. Thank you for the comments about mute. I don't think I clicked the mute button, but I have just changed my microphone source to be able to get back on track. Perhaps that's a little sign that I need to speed up a smidge, and even my computer is sick of my voice. Apologies. Hopefully I'm back here and you didn't miss too much of what I was suggesting there. My final point I was laboring really on the responsive cloud platform was about getting other people in there and getting members of safeguarding staff and other people coming through. I'm seeing a few comments still coming in to suggest that I'm on mute. I'm not sure if that's still the case or not. Yeah, thank you, Liam. Our marketing manager is confirming. I think I'm back on track, and I can see the little the little line coming back up in Dig. So hopefully, though it's just people with a few seconds delay, but apologies. So we get other people in the platform. It means you don't have to be the single sole person who's responsible for seeing what's happening from filtering. Again, if digital is increasingly important in the classroom, it's increasingly important to school improvement. It's increasingly important to the digital strategy and the digital improvement of that school. Head teachers, department leads, faculty leads, subject leaders, they need to know how the internet is being used in their school, in their context, to be able to make informed decisions. We can surface all of that data and get all of that information in a really rich, user interactable reporting platform. And then I want to just talk a smidge about number two is about the Lightspeed's database. As I say, we've been around for 25 years and as a filter product, and I mentioned the Rocket before as a physical appliance that we've moved on from. But one of the things we've been able to keep has been the foundations of our Lightspeed database and the way that we categorize websites. No one else in our space has been developing a category database for over 25 years. No one else in our space has got 25 million students or so that they are who are actively using the internet and further giving us that information about how we can continue to refine our database. And we don't believe anyone in our competitive space is producing quite as granular a set of options that you could have directly out of the back to be able to put through. We have over 100 categories when we categorize, and we've got machine learning algorithms, and we've got different sources of information that feed those from a web crawler, a bit like a search engine would use, who go out to the website, who look at URLs that exist, who look at the metadata of those web pages, who look at the URLs, the outbound or the links that might be clicked, who look at the images, who analyze those images and the text to make a decision as to which category it goes in. That doesn't just lump it into, say, an education category. You can see some of our education categories in the screenshot there. We break it down into quite a few, and particularly that example around sex education and being able to define those type of resources is something that we want to be quite careful about. And educators definitely want to make sure that they're doing providing that information to the right people at the right time when they're delivering that type of personal and social health education. But in other spaces and for perhaps younger students, it's not as appropriate. And being able to draw that out is a real help that we find helps to make things easier for staff. Another great example I like to draw on is the idea of computer games. So, we've got a scenario whereby, computing games are a category. Of course they are. A lot of us want to block those because they're not always going to be providing educational usage. But we of course have a separate category there you can see on the screen for education games, where we've done some of that hard work for you. We know the websites and tools that are being used by teachers across the globe. We know which ones have education value that are still in that games-based learning model style. And we're drawing that distinction. But even beyond that, we also, this one isn't shown on the screen, but we do have a separate category for esports as well. So, where that computing games scenario is evolving, so are we. We're evolving with the market and giving IT admins and those a nice, easy to use toggle and a category that we are continually updating for aspects of computing games that are linked specifically to more esports courses that are being delivered now as part of education. Other ones that we've recently added, to be able to draw out the difference between generative and detective AI tools in separate categories, gives you at least sort of the reporting on how generative tools are being used, or the ability to allow or block them on a full-time or temporary basis, depending on the scenario that you're getting. But again, another category that we're constantly updating. And speaking of constantly updating, I mentioned earlier around that sort of cyber malware prevention area, and our cybersecurity categories are probably the most updated. It's very typical as one of the settings that you would see in a Lightspeed instance to have the unknown category. could be a new URL or an IP that we've not seen before, that'll be turned off. So it'll be blocked by default. If we've not seen it before across our database, chances are it's either brand new or it's perhaps got some level of malicious content. So we want to block it. But we don't just sort of provide that for you. If something logs into our unknown, that's what is feeding our categorization engine. That's what feeding that web crawler I mentioned earlier. So ultimately, something that is unknown will join the queue, and it's often very common for us to see that within 15 to 20 minutes, that malware or phishing link is now in the correct malware category, or that new educational resource that is brand new, being spun up, has suddenly been categorized correctly and added into our categories. Wanted to touch briefly around YouTube. Third, a major headache in many cases. It was for me with other providers that I've looked at before, because the nature of content being uploaded to YouTube and the nature of how it's created makes it very difficult for us to filter, makes it very difficult for us to weed out the effective use of YouTube from the ineffective. Lightspeed are certainly trying to solve in this space. It's a really busy space, and YouTube filtering within Lightspeed context, we call it Smart Play as a piece of proprietary technology that goes a long way to supporting you in being able to deliver a safe version of YouTube and to deliver an educationally effective version of YouTube, which isn't just the same as turning on YouTube's restricted mode. It is an option. If you want to go there, we can do it, but we recommend using Lightspeed Smart Play. Restricted mode ultimately goes back to the video classification. How did the uploader choose the content, or how has YouTube's content moderation team decided about that particular video? And it means that individual school staff, you as an IT director, or those responsible for filtering, when you get a ticket that says, please make this YouTube video available, you can't do it. You don't have the line of communication directly to YouTube to be able to change its designation within restricted mode. However, Lightspeed's Smart Play is giving you that control back, and we provide those allow and block lists both on an individual video basis and also on a category basis, on a channel basis. So you're able to allow an entire channel, including new uploads, or indeed block an entire channel, including any new uploads. But that still seems a little bit laborious. So let's not ask you to do that. Instead, however, we also apply our categorization engine to those videos as well. And we categorize them into an education-focused category. So we're reviewing the metadata of the video, screen captures from the video, the captions file from the video, to make a designation there on your behalf. And we're categorizing nearly 150,000 of those video links a day to be able to deliver to you a scenario where the correct educationally focused content on YouTube is allowed by default, and others are not, are blocked, are not displayed and not shown to our students. The fourth one to touch on in this scenario, before I'm going to move into a quite significant element of question and answers, which is brilliant. I love it. So get your questions in now if you've not already had a chance to. It's some really amazing functionality that I wish I'd seen more and more happening. We see that digitization of the classroom happening more and more, and we often see the importance of bringing our teachers along and providing them with additional professional learning to make the most of those use of digital technology. But we often leave some of the aspects of how we're bringing our parents along as a sort of afterthought, or something that we don't give initial conversation. And we know that parents are very concerned and should be an equal part in considering a young person's education. With Lightspeed's parent portal, we're providing a little bit of that control and visibility into that digital device directly to a parent or guardian that's matched against the student. That takes two major forms. The first is a reporting form, so that ultimately a parent is able to receive an email weekly or log into the portal to get more live instant access to understand how is the school's digital device being used.
How are we? What is my child doing with digital technology from an educational perspective? They can see the allowed list. These are the websites that we've done. And if you choose as well, you can expose and show that the websites that they've tried to access that were blocked. That can give a greater level of insight, perhaps where there's more levels of concern. But that choice is with you within the school if you wish to expose that from a reporting perspective. So we get students being able to see and understand what's happening there. The other side, of course, is actually more direct control. And I've seen it in numerous scenarios, perhaps now, where as part of a one-to-one plan, a device is going to go home, and it may be the only device at home, or it may be that the family don't feel quite as confident with digital technology, and certainly that aspect of digital parenting and how they should maintain a healthy balance of digital use at home. And here we are as educators trying to support digital skills in a 21st century curriculum by giving them to a digital device where that parent may just see that as more of the problem rather than solution. Giving them some level of control to be able to pause the internet, to be able to restrict web browsing, and to be able to support giving them access to the internet, but just turning off aspects of social media or aspects of YouTube, whilst allowing still content for research or access to Google Docs or 365 for to be able to complete assignments without distraction, are a really useful tool set for a parent or guardian to have access to allow them to have some control over the platform, to be involved in the process and that digital transformation, and to get them that insight into what's happening on the platform. So that we found in many cases where we've deployed it aids a lot of those conversations where you have a misunderstanding from parents as to exactly what's going on in the classroom, or that tricky conversation that with parents who come in and ask for help or ultimately need help to manage the effective and safe use of that device when it does go home as well. An increasing issue certainly within one-to-one programs, and a major area that we're helping out with the school sort of faculty themselves. That was 4 major areas that I've touched on there around the cloud platform and what we're doing in the cloud to being an easier atmosphere there, the depth and precision that we have with the database, what we're doing with YouTube to be able to give you a more granular experience, and also then around our parent portal and what that does to support the school and home relationship. There is, of course, much more to Lightspeed Filter that I've not touched. And again, you coming back to the scenario of some of the numbers at the beginning, to the size and scale that we operate, you don't get to a scenario where there are large areas of functionality that we don't have. We simply wouldn't be supporting as many schools as we did if we didn't. But you've heard how detailed I've went into some of, and that was just 4 I've talked about. If anyone does want to schedule me to talk on for several days about each of these, hey, I'm game. You know that I like to talk, but you probably don't want to hear me talk about all of these things. Perhaps it's a good point to reference if you do want to discuss anything more specific to your requirements about Lightspeed Filter. You just need to reach out. You've obviously had a couple of emails to perhaps get you here and listening to this webinar. I know we're going to follow up with you afterwards, or if you want to pop something in chat to say, hey, can you drop me an email afterwards? We'll be delighted to get in touch, and we can discuss any of these points or any of the requirements that you have more specifically. If it's really linked to your school, I'm going to try and answer some of those just now if I can that are coming, I guess, into the comment section, and I'll have a little flick down here as some of them come in. They're moving relatively quick and fast. How long do you retain our data for? Okay, so the data retention aspect is another really nice feature of Lightspeed. We offer, as part of our reporting platform, unlimited data retention. We can keep it for as long as you need. And we know that some schools have different data retention policies that need data to be deleted after a certain number of years. We have our privacy and our security teams create custom data sharing agreements, can look at transfer risk assessments with you to make sure that we are ultimately meeting your requirement. But we aren't limited by the storage capability of a physical server. So we are able to give you that as an unlimited option, just included with the price. There's no additional layers or anything that we put on top of that to be able to provide you with an unlimited amount of data retention should you require it, or should you require something more specific. As part of that process, we can make sure that we get an agreement in place to delete the data as required. But it's really, really pretty awesome to be able to jump back a long time in history to be able to see what's going on there. And pick up another one here around, are we able to help support, assist migrating policies from another web filtering product to Lightspeed? We certainly can, and we have processes to do that. That can look. Let me just sort of touch on the implementation process in a broader sense to help address the question. Ultimately, we'll want to meet with you and understand those existing policies and how they're enforced. We'd like to kind of run, our sales engineering team like to run and show you what that would look like from a Lightspeed perspective. What we find in about 80 to 90% of the cases is that some of those more bespoke policies that you've put in places, some of the websites that you've maybe added to a custom allow list in your existing filter, you don't need them in a custom allow anymore, because we've got them correctly categorized in a category that you would like. We absolutely can help migrate those, and that process is pretty illuminating. It's also a really good time as well for you to have a little bit of a rethink about what access you're allowing. And again, we've got tools to support that and support that conversation between IT, safeguarding, instructional technology teams, and those supporting pedagogy and supporting the schools. What do they need access to? From a migration perspective, that looks like taking that, aggregating that information, and ultimately making sure that, yeah, as part of the cutover from one to another, that you have a seamless experience, that the websites that were blocked before are still blocked, the websites that were accessible before are still accessible. So that's another question there. Let me delve into a couple of questions popping in about iPads that I'll come back to in a second. How do I see what category a website is in? Okay, well, there's a couple of different ways here. Specifically, if you're a Lightspeed customer already, or you're in the platform, at the top of the rules page, there is a box that allows you to enter the that and do a lookup. So it will tell you there, and if you really need to recategorize it, you can recategorize it directly from there. That will show you where that is. It's also available on the individual student profile. So you can go into the student, you can click on Joe Blogs, you can see then and see a rule checker just for Joe, and just what Joe Blogs would have there. So we can see, okay, this website is part of this category and it's blocked by this part of the hierarchy. Here's where the rule that applies to Joe is coming from, and breaking down all of those rules you can do on a user basis. If you're not yet a Lightspeed customer, you still actually have access to view what's happening from a Lightspeed perspective, even outside of the platform. We maintain a view and a window into this at archive.lightspeedsystems.com. That'll show you our categorization engine, and it also has an interesting functionality that it's worth talking about for a few seconds, which helps to make things easier as well, that you can also submit a website for review. And I say you, as in the IT person, if you want to click that button and write a comment. We have 3 members of our categorization team who will manually review those categories and then get a response to you, that you'll see an email and understand how the categorization is went. Really, though, where it can help, and we see this in an increasing number of settings, is that we're actually directing teachers to this website to go, can you please check that this website is available before your lesson? If it's not, well, instead of logging a ticket directly with me in IT, can you please submit it to Lightspeed? They will add it to the correct category database that we already allow as a school, and everything moves along swimmingly without an IT ticket, and everyone happens. And we also support that from a teacher perspective with a really neat Chrome extension that allows them to manage that process as well. So you can push that Chrome extension, they can do all of the lookups in there, and then make that quick request as well if we want to have a manual review of the tool as well. iPads. There's a few things here. Actually, filter logs, any incursions against the device or logs that are there. Okay. iPads are an interesting beast, and you'll have seen certainly on my previous slide when we made reference around Chrome, Windows, Mac, and iOS. We do like to provide feature parity across all of those platforms as best we can. It's fair to say that on iOS, Apple make that as hard as they possibly can for us. Not mainly around the sandbox nature of how applications work. Our approach on an iPad involves using an MDM payload that exists and has existed for many years, but is not used by all filtering providers. It is called the Web Content Filter payload. It ultimately is a global payload that is deployed. So any activity coming from any device is captured by that payload, is analyzed, and a decision is made locally on the device. Brilliant, great. The question asked here was specifically around identifying users. That payload allows you to inject a username variable in. So in a one-to-one scenario, that's fine. You can inject the username of the student. So we have the iPad belonging to Joe Blogs. So all of the traffic comes from Joe. On a shared device scenario, it's worth calling out the two ways that can be done. If it's done the official Apple way, using Apple IDs and Apple School Manager to define an iPad truly as a shared iPad, that process I've just outlined works exactly the same. The username can be passed just as before, because effectively the student has to log in to a shared iPad that they pulled from the cart. I know, many schools still don't actually adopt that in a shared scenario. And the scenario that you'll either then will see is you would see an IP address if you've chosen not to push any sort of username, or you also have the ability to push a custom username. So you could define that was iPad 5 or Yellow Trolley iPad 5, or however you want it to do, to be able to customize that policy and to be able to push so that you're able to identify the device that it comes from. In that scenario, you also then need to be very careful to make sure that the teacher using that cart has also got a good way to attribute Yellow Trolley iPad 5 to the individual student, should there be anything alarming that's coming through. And that's ultimately the scenarios that you've got. We do need to have user identifiable traffic, in my view, when we're looking at filter, and some of those IP addresses really don't cut it. And there are scenarios to be able to get more information coming through, that you're not just relying on serial number, IP address, or MAC address to be able to identify what's happening there with the iPad. Certainly more complicated, and we would love to discuss what we're doing on iPad and how we're doing it more specifically with you in that scenario as well. But time for a couple more that I'm pulling out here. Apologies if I've not got to yours. I am trying to maintain some form of communication whilst also flowing through here of what I'm looking for. Here's another one, which is a good one I've missed. With YouTube, is it just the access that's modified? Can you block comments? Yes, I should have mentioned that. With our Smart Play functionality, it also allows you to customize the sort of video viewing experience. So the comments disappear like you'd expect. The sidebar also disappears like you'd expect. And the recommended video functionality, that also goes away as well. We're also able to enforce the user, outside of restricted mode, the user upload, the age restrictions that YouTube have as well. So we can set those too within YouTube as well. That's one more. I'm just scrolling through a lot of comments of people saying that they can't hear me. Some questions up at the top. Does the product available on UK-based AWS servers? Great question. Calling it out again, no. Lightspeed's cloud reporting platform is hosted in US AWS servers. It is stored there. There's always two concerns when I mention this. The first one is about latency, and I want to say that's really not an issue or a concern that we need to think about. Because the smart agent is filtering directly on the device, the filtering decision happens there and then with next to no latency within that internal network on the device. It's only then that the reporting packet of information needs to get sent. So there's no latency involved. The other side of that is, of course, that data protection bit, and that idea, certainly from when GDPR first came out, that we wanted to make sure that data was stored within the European Union, stored within the UK more specifically. We now have the EU-UK adequacy agreement with the US, which ultimately says that is, where US data requirements are largely similar, and meet the adequacy needs for GDPR. We still also do have the ability to sign standard contractual clauses, which bind us to follow the rules of GDPR, largely speaking, if that is required. We also have some customers in the UK who entered into separate legal agreements to make sure that our data practices are sound for them. I've yet to certainly find anyone to come across that particular area and to be to find it to be an issue that we can't resolve between your school and Lightspeed, that we can't provide an adequate solution that meets your data protection team's requirements. In many cases, what we're doing within AWS in the US, and actually now that the privacy landscape is changing in the US, there are certain states, California being one in particular, where the data requirements there are nearly more stringent or nearly identically stringent to GDPR. And that adequacy decision means that we are keeping your students' data as safe and secure as you would need them to be, and as we need to make sure that we're doing to meet our duty as a data controller. So hopefully that one helps. Okay, what else do we need to look at? One last question that comes through. Let me see. Can you have different age group restrictions for different groups? Absolutely. So again, that was picked up a little from a YouTube perspective, but even just from a categorization perspective, we like to follow a hierarchy. So we will import groups similar to how you would have groups set up in either Google Workspace or within your Microsoft tenancy, usually in Active Directory. However that flows, we will match. So we'll maybe have a high-level policy, then we'll have a nested students and teachers group. Then within the within the students group, there could be groups per years. Anytime there is a new group, you can have new policy set. So absolutely, we can configure that granularity down. Of course, we can also restrict the admin visibility. So if you have a year 10 sort of year pastoral year head, their access to the Lightspeed reports might only be to year 10. And we can have all of that granularity from that side perspective, from a reporting perspective as well. So lots of granularity that comes through there. Hopefully I've picked up quite a few of the questions. Apologies if I haven't. We do have a full transcript of what we've got, and if I've not answered it verbally, I'll make sure that myself or one of the team follows up with you afterwards. Thank you so much for joining and putting up with me and putting up with my little microphone issue in the middle as well there. Hopefully that was useful. And hopefully the whole session was useful, as I kind of given you some of my thoughts around how we're making IT easier from a filtering and monitoring, filtering standpoint. And the monitoring bit comes tomorrow, actually. I mentioned that at the beginning, but we have been sending out some messages around that monitoring perspective as well. So some messages. So I'm back on script tomorrow, a little bit later, tomorrow afternoon, talking more specifically about the Lightspeed alerting tool. Appreciate that filtering and monitoring, or filter and alert from a Lightspeed perspective, are so often going hand in hand, but we wanted to separate them out into two separate sessions to focus on slightly different aspects and go into detail in slightly different ways. So tomorrow I'll be more looking at those proactive notifications, what we can do to look at Google Workspace and 365 and give you some coverage there. How our human review team are able to support you and do some really heavy lifting there. And we'll make sure that you get a link to sign up to that one if you wanted to hop on that one for another similar session. To be able to going through that other major tool that we're seeing supporting the needs of keeping children safe in education and for 2023, and the standards for filtering and monitoring as well. Majorly important tool that we want to talk about tomorrow too. So still time to sign up, and you could be back tomorrow. Just like this one, you'll get the recording for filtering. If you want to sign up and get the recording for alerting, please feel free. We'll make sure to send that out. And of course, last final message, if you feel free to reach out to either myself, you should have had an email from me this morning, sort of as a reminder, or my email address is relatively easy to guess. It's cmccabe at lightspeedsystems.com, or any of the Lightspeed team will be more than happy to discuss your individual requirements, your individual circumstances here in the UK, and in how we can hopefully make your filtering experience just that little bit easier for you, if indeed that's something you need. Please reach out. We're happy to help. Thank you once again for joining, and I look forward to seeing some of your names, maybe faces, online or in person at another event very soon. Thank you so much for joining us.